Welcome to EasyClear, your one-stop software solution. Our goal is to uniform the supply chain along all modalities into one platform. This is inclusive of Transnet, customs services, and IATA, along with cross-border and transit into upper African countries. We offer system as a service that allow easy-to-use transitions between the forwarding, RCG, clearance, invoicing with disbursements, reporting, and bulk interactions. Follow me into the agent industry with your host, Devin Few.
To EasyClear. For those of you who have not seen our web application before, we'll provide you with a username and password in order to log in there. And this will be unique to your company. And we do not share this information due to the POPI Act. I'm just going to log in, and today we're going to go straight into acquittals and what are the requirements for acquittals as to how the EasyClear system can handle your acquittal lists. I have left the microphones open for the session, so if you feel at any given point whilst we're going through the acquittals that you have questions, concerns, or if there's any further comments that customs have recently made that you'd like to share on board, you're more than welcome to do so. All right, so this will be an open mic session for anybody who requires it. You're more than welcome to just open your mic, obviously say your name so we know who you are, and then you can divulge into your question thereafter. All right, let's go straight into the EasyClear system. Yeah, so if there's anybody who wants to go through the menu list on the left-hand side, you'll need to just re-go over the introduction video that we're going to upload soon. The videos are quite readily available. We're just validating them and vetting them prior to going through again. So I was just hearing scratching noises, so I'll just mute it. If you would like to unmute and ask a question, by all means, you can go ahead. Please note this is being recorded, but what I do before I put on YouTube is you can see everybody's names here, so I'd rather just take it out and darken those screens so that this doesn't go onto YouTube itself. Okay, so to start off with the acquittals, what are the main requirements for an acquittal? Now, EasyClear's got an acquittal system. 90% of the time, customs ever since 2018 have been doing automatic acquittals, acquitting your item based on your export entry acquits your import, or vice versa, your import entry or your re-importation entry has acquitted your initial exports under conditions like repair and return, temporary export for re-importation, a permanent resident holder that's returning back to the country. There's a finite scenario as to customs policies for what they actually allow based on the acquittal system, or whether or not you actually have to pay full duty and VAT on the item. So if customs at any point sends you a list stating that these items need to please be acquitted, EasyClear's expectation is you will most likely, and I'm going to give a prime example, like say for instance, an XE entry being a warehousing entry, or a GR entry, general rebate, where you know you've got an onward transfer mode. So customs system and EasyClear's system do two primary checks to confirm is the file acquittal related or not. So before we go into the acquittal system, we need to find out, will your file even be allowed to go into the EasyClear acquittal system? Now, how do we do this? If you go into your export bill of entry or your import bill of entry, there are three main purpose points as to what an acquittal file requirement is. So say, for instance, number one, if you're having a GR entry, goods went out the country, and then they came back in the country, let's mention that via road freight for the GR type entry, and we'll insert it onward transfer mode 3. So EasyClear's primary checking system is the fact that your onward transfer mode is there. The duty types fall under reimportation or cost of repair or any of the above type of scenarios, inclusive with your rebate code. But EasyClear's checks will specifically be onward transfer mode and the acquitting agent. If those two boxes are ticked on your declaration by inserting the actual information, that makes the file acquittal available for the EasyClear system. And then you'll note one very, very last thing within EasyClear. So it's a 3-point step to make certain that you have an acquittal file, is the fact that you actually have an onward transfer mode, you have an acquitting agent, and then right at the end, when you reach the SAD 500, you tick the box that says acquittal required. Here's an open mic. Do you have any questions? Oh, I think I might accidentally be open. I'm just going to mute all again. But yeah, at any point, you're more than welcome to stop me, because I know how confusing the acquittal system can get. But as I said, within regards to EasyClear, your SAD 500 documentation, we have the acquittal required tick box. Now you'll see for the duty type for 4,000 straight up import of CCA type entries from BELN, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, and Namibia, acquittal required for straight up import is not even a valid tick box because it doesn't follow suit to a straight up import duty type. So then we'll just go to the home page and we'll go into the acquittals system. Now I'm going to go over the few tabs over here. The acquittals have the acquittal system. The acquittal system is where you can go in and you are acquitting any export entry against the import entry or vice versa based on their bill of entry details and obviously the values. The outstanding acquittals is where you can actually review and double check your acquitted items versus your outstanding acquittals so that you can see which one is still outstanding on your EasyClear list. And acquittals have a maximum of, I believe it's 7 days, up till 14 days, where you have to acquit by. I want to double check my notes on that one. You have a maximum of 28 days, and then any further than 28 days, you will have not acquitted the file. So customs might turn around and ask you for the duty and VATs on the original file, or alternatively, just penalize you for not doing the acquittal in time. In order to do an acquittal with customs, you would do the reports within the EasyClear system. You can print out a consolidated reports of all acquittals for that time period, taking it into customs on an Excel list to get stamped. Customs will also ask you for any relevant documentation, such as the customs worksheet, the SAD 500, and inclusive or non-inclusive of the paperless release, and sometimes even as far as the clearing instruction, and possibly and potentially the packing lists. So most companies for air freight scenarios, they generally do take the SAD 500 documents or any 507, 502, or 505 documentation that follows. Take that into customs in order to get the file acquitted and stamped. So now we'll figure out with regards to the EasyClear system. Now on the clearance level, we'll have onward transfer mode, the acquitting agent, and then the acquitting tick box. There is a method using the cross reference that if you have an onward transfer mode, you have an acquitting agent, but you forgot to tick the box on the SAD 500 saying acquittal required. The file will physically not automatically land in the acquittal system based on those 3 criteria steps. So you need to utilize the cross-reference system to tick the box, and then that will automatically create the acquittal based on that file, as long as it meets the acquittal conditions. Right, so if you have a handover shipment as well, and you need to acquit the file, you can also directly go into the acquittal system and raise a manual acquittal as well. So we'll start off by going to the acquittal system. Now, as I mentioned before, at this moment in time, you should just be able to press the search button. And if your file is acquittal related, you might have the opportunity to go in there, double check that your file has definitely got the acquittal necessities like this one over here. And then with regards to EasyClear, it will automatically have created it. So I'm going to go into the import VOC file to see why is this file all of a sudden an acquittal, whereas 1 or 2 files may have been lost in translation. So if I go into this entry, I can see there is no onward transfer mode. But based on the CCA type, EasyClear allows you to bypass that scenario and create the acquittal accordingly. So I'm just bypassing the administrative privileges. I should have used my password. EasyClear password tends to change. Let's let's authenticate. Okay, we'll just press ignore on the house as well. So I see here based on this file here, there's no onward transfer mode, there's no acquitting agent. And then if we jump right over to the SAD 500, we can also just double check there's no acquittal required. So based on this file, it's a DP entry. How's this file in the acquittal register, yet it doesn't meet the requirements? Well, see, in regards to this entry specifically, based on the previous testing, this is a split entry based on the fact that there's a DP and a GR entry. So the system is clever in that regard that if you do miss the initial criteria steps, you can also come back to the secondary duty type that if you have a split entry, it is based on a GR type entry. It does not meet the requirements on the registration screen for onward transfer mode and acquitting agent. So if you only have one duty type, like a GR only, make certain to put in that information. But if you have a split entry, your DP is not necessarily going to have the onward transfer mode. The DP side is not going to have the acquitting agent. So you do have the opportunity to leave that blank, and then EasyClear just relates the duty type to allow you to tick the box for acquittal required. But in every other circumstance, please make certain you insert the onward transfer mode.
That's unfortunate because we are not able to make any undertaking. We can't undertake to look after your loan. That's the problem. That's why we haven't. You've been receiving a letter from us for a long time because the problem with the undertaking.
I think that conversation's not meant for us. So just unmute if the question was derived from me, but I don't believe that question was for us.
The camera off.
I'm not allowing cameras, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, take it off. Okay, it's off now.
Cool, thanks guys.
We can't enlarge it.
No worries. All right, so yeah, as I said before, if you've got a split entry like this with a DPGR, you just need to tick the box for acquittal required, and that would sort that out. Cool. Dori, any other audio that came through during the recording, I can quite simply and easily just cut it out. So don't stress too much. Or try not to swear either. Right, so we'll go back to the acquittal system. And now the fact that you saw that there was a tick box based on the acquittal required for the GR side, that's why when I hit press the search button, I can see there is my acquittal that's automatically created itself based on my GR entry and just purely ticking the box. Right. So this only will create the acquittal on the save of the SAD 500. And also, if we do change settings on your company, we can make certain that acquittals are only created if there's a successful EDI message. But it's nice to have it that the acquittals get created automatically, regardless of the file's EDI status, so that whoever's running your acquittal register can make 100% certain that the files are readily available, they've got all the necessary documentation before the 7 days are up before you have to do your initial acquittal. Anything longer than 7 days is a little bit late with customs, but you have a maximum of 28 days before there's a cutoff. The moment there's a cutoff, sorry, you're going to need to answer to customs and any repercussions based on that. Right. So before we go into the acquittal file, the acquittal system is there to allow you to complete the information. So I do see that that information pulls through, but we also need to find out who's the client, was there a transporter, and based on this entry, the acquitting agents didn't pull through. So these three fields over here can potentially pull through to the entry if they were inserted. So I'm just going to go back to the VOC entry and make the necessary corrections there. But you can also go as far as making the corrections in the acquittal system as well. So what are we missing? We were missing the acquitting agent. The acquitting agent in this case, I'm just going to use any test TS. So I can say, oh, somebody raised a testinator. Interesting name, like a terminator. Would there be a transporter? So I'm having DHL is first and foremost registered there. And then for the clients, we can enable a separate field that pulls to the client, but I'm more than commonly just use my importer, but your client might differ depending on who the actual recipient client is or the buying party. So your importer might be the representative, but you might have a different buying party. That's why we leave the client field open for your discretion. All right, so I'm just going to resave this file, ignore the house. So now I'll take notes. I'm creating the acquittal, amending the VOC portion that's not yet sent to customs or not yet successful, just to make certain that is my acquittal 100% correct based on the VOC changes that I've just done now. We can go into the acquittal system, but then you'll see even though I've made changes to the acquittal system, no changes happen here. So the very first time the file automatically creates itself based on the preview of the SAD 500 or different setting to EDI to customs, that's when the acquittal file is created and the information pulls through. If you try and do the acquittal file after the fact, you will take notes based on the VOC that information is not available. So don't try and amend a file after the fact, unless you're doing another VOC on top of the VOC, inserting that information, then that file may yet be acquitted with the information. But based on that, I would rather say, okay, cool. Instead of creating another unnecessary VOC for customs just to bring through the information for the acquittal automatically, the best way is it's 3 fields. Just go back to the file, have the SAD open in front of you or something of the sort, and complete the file. All right, so client was Devon Easy Clear, the transporter would have been DHL, and the acquitting agent would have been Easy Clear, P2 Ltd, as I'm the agent taking responsibility for the acquittal. I can press save, and you note that there's the dog tags or the clothes tags on the right-hand side of client and acquitting agent. That is because it gives you the opportunity to add in a client reference, any other third-party references as well. For your first client reference, you should be able to just type it in, press the save button, and there's the first one. For the secondary one, you would need to press the plus button, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the save thereafter. That allows you the opportunity to save more than one client reference, purchase order number, or household waybill number, or acquitting numbers based on your selection. All right, so that's just a client reference. If you want to add further information like a purchase order onto your client for the acquittal file, that's what the tags are there for. Okay, then we'll scroll further down. We have the transport details. Transport details. Now, it just says the word transport details because there's no modality on the screen, so it doesn't understand whether you're doing air, road, rail, or sea. It just leaves you open with the transport details. If you're doing a sea freight type entry, take note of the registration screen, be it imports or exports, where you're asking for flight detail. Flight detail will ask you to insert field 1 and field 2. Truck and trailer for road freight is the same thing, field 1, 2, and 3. Horse carriage and carriage. Sea freight type entries is always going to ask you for vessel name, skipper box, and voyage number. It needs to be in that format, please, where you skip the middle box because it goes into the right place in the back end when it does save, so that the right information can pull through to your acquittal file, such as vessel name and voyage number in the right order. But thankfully, when you're doing automatic acquittal from the file of your import file, that information does pull through automatically. Your master bill of lading number. So if you're doing a handover shipment, but you still have to acquit it, just make sure you insert the correct master bill of lading number. And then destination being South Africa, I'll just put in the word ZA and you can proceed from there. Yes, Mark, I see you have a question.
Hi, Devon.
Oh, yes. How's it going?
Oh, good, good. I
Good,
want
Libby.
to know, you said the acquittal agent, we like when we start to frame an entry, we have to put acquittal, we have to click on the block of acquittal required, or only when we do the acquittals, we just go to the system of acquittal, then you create it there.
I think that'll best be explained when I'm using the cross-reference, because say, for instance, I've ticked all the boxes that allow EasyClear to recognize the file is an acquittal file. I've got to insert my onward transfer mode. Then the acquitting agent. So the acquitting agents, you know who's registered as an acquitting agent or not. So if you do a lot of repairs and returns and customs demands that you have to acquit the file, you're probably going to be registered with customs as an acquitting agent. So the acquitting agent would generally be your company. So you need to know, are you acquitting it for somebody else? Are you the responsible acquitting party? Or do you do handover shipments asking another company to acquit the file for you? So a lot of the time, RRT entries and RRB entries have the onward transfer mode, have the acquitting agent, and then just on the last box right at the end of the SAD 500, even if you're on the VOC screen, there's an acquittal required tick box. So automatically, if you have an onward transfer mode, that box is ticked by default. So it should have created the acquittal file for you. But I'd like to answer that question in more detail when I reach the cross reference to show you what happens if you don't tick the box.
Thank you.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Fantastic. I appreciate the questions. I really, really do. Right. So furthermore to that, we can go into the remarks. Under the remarks, it's just a short description of your goods. So whether you want to make a short description of the goods that you might be acquitting the item now, but it's due for return later, the more information you share with customs, the better, so they can fully understand the situation at hand. Just going to press the save button again. And when you're adding a new acquittal file, you can go one field at a time and just press save. So if I were adding a brand new file and I just had to put in the file number 123 and press save, I can see I'm able to save an acquittal file at any given point. There are no validations to the acquittal system, other than the fact that the client name kind of has to exist in the database. So you're picking up a client that already exists. We don't have the plus button to add a new client into the system. But if I had to say this is a test, 123, confirming that client name doesn't exist in the system at all, I can see that it does still save what I type, but that name wouldn't be existing in your client maintenance. So you can free type in an acquittal file. It will print out the information, but in this regards, it might miss an address if your client asks for a copy of the acquittal list or their acquittal list, for instance. Right, so I'm just going to go back into the file, just showing you more the fundamental functions behind it and showing you how versatile the acquittal system really is. And when you are searching, if you click anywhere on the highlighted blue section, you'll note that I don't need to select the arrow. My file opens if I click on the middle of it. Cool, so there's my short description saved. Now for the bill of entry details. If this file was released by customs, the bill of entry details should automatically be here. I know that this file wasn't released. I didn't want to release so I can tamper around with it and play with it within the EasyClear system, just to show you the fundamentals of how EasyClear can still create an acquittal file regardless of the EDI message to customs. So you can put on the settings that you can only do acquittals if it is released by customs or change other settings like that. But I prefer to build my acquittal list, be prepared for customs before they come knocking. Right, so your bill of entry number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters long. Obviously that number there was thumbsucked, so it would have been produced by customs. Bill of entry date, 22, 10, 10. So say, for instance, was submitted yesterday, your bill of entry date more than commonly would be yesterday. The duty type, in this case, is a GR. It was registered. The registration date pulls through automatically. You can amend it here, but I would not recommend that. Description, the test package description pulled through from the file. The customs office being JHB. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you would need to take your acquittal list to your nearest customs office. It doesn't necessarily have to be the customs office of commencement. I mean, you could be sitting in Durban and having done a lot of byte bridge entries, you can still take your acquittal list with a runner through to the Durban office to get it stamped. Additional reference numbers. So if there are any additional reference numbers, container numbers would have to be manually inserted there. What is the cargo status? So if there's a bunch of cargo statuses between FCL, LCL, break bulk, unnecessary. If we leave it as other for any other type of package, like an air freight shipment, I'm just going to leave it as other. And then ports of exit would have been mandatory on the file because there was an onward transfer mode. So based on this one that came in via JHB, or the rebate entry through JHB, because it went out the country, got repaired, and then you got the GR general rebate for returning the goods. So it could have been a repair return situation, temporary export for reimportation. There's a lot of rebate codes that need to be used and need to be put onto the file. So just make sure it's, and if you do have a general rebate scenario, using the correct rebate code provided by customs. From this point here, I can see what is the value of the goods. I'm just going to specify that as 1,000. And then what is the total remaining of the goods? I know this bottom part of the screen might look a bit confusing, but think of it like the tariff lines. On the left-hand side is my supplier's invoice with my total value. And based on the right-hand side, how many entries or export entries have I used to acquit against the total 1,000 of the value of the goods? You could have multiple entries that acquits an import entry based on your export entries, or you could have one-to-one relationship where the export acquits the import, done. So your remaining on the far right-hand side, don't tamper with that, don't touch it, because that'll be the calculations based on your disposals, which is this orange button on top. So before we run with that, we'll say what was the weight. I'm going to make that 15 as well. And package type is just package. So I'll press the save button there, and then we should have seen automatically that remaining should have gone to 1,015. Let's just check on the settings there, because that should have been automatic on the remaining based on the total. Cool. So now we've got the inbound acquittal file saved. If I had to hit the print menu, you'll see nothing comes out. Disposals. So what is the disposals? Based on the disposals, if there is an export entry that has previous bill of entry details acquitting the import entry, EasyClear can automatically find that record based on the export details and pull that entry through. If you'd like to add one from scratch, you can just press the paper over here and start adding the information based on your export entry that covers the import entry. So if we want to see, okay, cool, when do we find a record found that can correspond my import entry against my export entry? So if we go back to this entry over here for the voucher of correction, I can grab my bill of entry number. And I do believe the bill of entry number would actually have to exist on the file as well. So I might need to run a side update there just to give it its bill of entry number. And I can go to the export bill of entry. So I've created my import acquittal file, but I don't have the export file that acquits the imports. Right, so instead of creating a file from scratch, I'm just going to use this Devon123. And then base that on the EIG scenario, because export of imported goods. So it was the GR inwards. And I'm going to be using this as a straight up export. However, because of the straight up exports, let me actually just go there. I forgot what CPC code was used for the import entry. So it was CCA 4000. All right. So let's send it back to Namibia based on this export type entry. So I'm going to press the search button over here. Once I'm done, then I'm just going to use this Devon123. we'll change this back to a CCA type entry because we send that back to Namibia. This is a straight up export. I don't need the onward transfer mode because I'm not acquitting the export. I'm using the export to acquit the import entry. So this is a straight up export out of South Africa based on my previous CPC code of 11. So we can maybe utilize the SARS CPC poster to see where does 1100 fall on the right hand side as a digit and 11 falling on the right hand side. Right, so we can see the ERG type entry. So if I just had to use the CCA selection or the straight up export, I can see straight up export will give me 6100. And if I had to go as far as using the 3052s, for instance, I can see there's my 3837. So if you brought it in as a 3700, you can send it out as a 3837. But your CPC codes for the export entry have to be unique and make certain that if you import it as 1100, I'm expecting my export entry to have the 11 on the far right hand side. So when I'm asked by customs what entry is this linked to, I will use the warehousing details, even though it wasn't a warehouse entry. It was a 401100 straight up import into South Africa that we're re-exporting out the country based on that GR type entry. Ooh, I might have the CPC code wrong. Let me just go back and double check. So it's always good to triple check if needs be. CCA. I don't want to get that error message again by pressing the right arrow. I haven't changed anything on the registration screen, so I don't need to save. So I'm going to bypass it by just going directly to the SAD 500. But if you know you made changes to your file, you will have to recalculate the worksheet. So based on this one, if you can't get to the SAD and work backwards just to see what tariff lines, you are going to have to use the duplication checking and use the bypass feature as well. Oh, caps lock was on. Let me take it off. Fantastic. Okay, and duplicate house as well. Cool. So now we can go over to suppliers invoice and the tariff line. So I can see this one might have been the 1100, but that's not what we're going to be acquitting or re-exporting. We're going to be re-exporting the GR's 1400. So I know this one came from Namibia, but it's also got a 407 rebate code. So it's the 1400 that we're looking for. So if I had to go back to my export entry, I can just rename this to be the ERG again, and then we can also validate as per the SARS CPC poster. It's always good to have a CPC poster open and printed out onto your wall, or at least available on your computer. On the CPC poster, I can just double check. I had a 1400. So now if I use Control F and just have a look in the CPC poster, I can see how many results. There's 17 results for the word 14. So it might be in your best interest to just double check. On the left-hand side, we had 1400. So now we're looking for the CPC code where 14 lands on the right-hand side and does a full suit to the same GR type entry. So I see here there's a 1514. Is that correct for my entry? Well, it does read abandonment or destruction of previously goods for relief of duty. So I doubt, even though it's got the 14 in the right place, I doubt that's a CPC code I'm going to be using because the description says I'm just going to be abandoning the goods. So when you do use the CPC code, just remember that your CPC code will always ask you for the initial requested CPC code on the re-exportation to land on the right-hand side if you have to reference the export details. For RRB and RRT shipments, this is unnecessary, but an RRT shipment is just a factor of does it acquit itself. All right, so we can see if we had used the 1400, there's only one other scenario for 14 landing on the right-hand side to put in those export details, marrying up the export entry back into the import. And alternatively, it also links by the client name. So let's go back into the Acquittal system to see what files do have relationships based on the acquittal system. And the best way to identify that is also in your system to go to the reports. If you've got an unacquitted list, an acquitted list or unacquitted list, you can take your acquitted list to see what customs have already stamped, and you can go ahead and undo that acquittal. Or alternatively, you can review your unacquitted lists by registration date, and that just confirms and downloads the files that haven't been acquitted for a specific time period. So if you have an import entry and requires an export acquittal, that's what it's going to give you. So you can specify your start date and end date, just press the download, and that'll give me my unacquitted by registration date. So it's a nice way of keeping track of what EasyClear has automatically created for you as an acquittal register. And then we can have a look over here on the system just to double check what are the files that have not yet been acquitted. So I'm going to use this RIB file over here as a prime example. And we can view the information on the right-hand side to see what is the description, customs value, original bond amount if it was a bonded type entry, what is the acquittal bond amount, acquittal weights, and list number. This list number is the most important part of this document. So if you know that you have raised an acquittal register, you'd be giving it a list number, and list number, for instance, 001, would be a list number of acquitted items that you can reprint from the system. Unacquitted items generally don't have a list number because you haven't provided one as yet. Right, so if all the requirements are met, then we can just go back into this file over here. And I can see that this is not acquitted as yet, but it does have bill of entry details. So based on that one, if there are any export entries that do correspond to the re-exportation that match the input-export details, you can link them up by that way. Or say, for instance, you have a DP entry that's also got a RRB or RRB that's acquitted by a DP entry, you could link it up by that way as well. Right, so if we are raising an acquittal, we've got the acquittal raised in the system. What is the value and what's the remaining value? So I'm just going to specify this as 1,000 and again as 1,000. It looks like if that doesn't pull through automatically, I've got to save it in there. Then for the disposals, what is the acquittal reference? So this will be my file 001. So if I'm capturing a handover shipment, I can pull it that way. Or if there is a link to the shipment, you would actually automatically see a linking as well. So for the acquitting agents, this will be EasyClear. Is there a contact person, contact email address, and contact number? And that'll be specific to the acquitting agent. What was the acquitting bill of entry number? So if the import entry was acquitted by export, you put the export's bill of entry number because it acquits the import. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters long. 2022, 10/11 for today's date. Acquitting bill of entry duty type. So what did it leave the country as? So we can mention that went out as a ELG, for instance. Came in for temporary measure, wasn't sold, so we're re-exporting it after the 6 months that it was within the country. Transport details, as it could be truck followed by your trailer details. The acquitting bill of lading number. So obviously, if it's an air freight shipment, it would just be your master number. So you would use your master bill lading number for sea or your manifest number for road. Then your provisional payment number, if there's any provisional payments and provisional payment dates that you did do on the entry due to the conditional release or whatever the case may be, then you can also insert that information in. Or if you had an initial PPT, temporary import, and you want to make certain your export entry liquidates that temporary import, you'd use that provisional payment number specifically to that provisional payment of the temporary import. Then the list number. The list number is very much derived by you and your company. So when you're creating a list number, try use a logical process such as This one, for instance, is going to be acquitted in JHB. Might be the byte entry because it's going via ELG, but I do know that I'm always going to be taking my list to the JHB office using my runner. So I'll give it a unique reference like JHB, the year, the month, the day, followed by maybe a 4-character or 4-digit trailing number. So I can mention that this one is my list number 1. Then if I want to, anything that prints under list number 1, I can do a reprint from the system and just print out that list number that I gave it. And I can give multiple files the same list number to make certain that when my runner is taking the acquittal register to customs to get stamped, I know what list number 1 is going to entail. Then I know what list number 2 is going to entail because you yourself had created the number. Based on the status, you can't actually render the status as yet because if you haven't taken it to customs as yet, you don't know if they actually accepted the acquittal. Or is it on hand or is it rejected? Is it accepted, acquitted in customs, on hand or rejected? So at this moment of time, I haven't taken my runner to customs yet, so I leave the status blank. If it is rejected, for instance, or on hand or in customs, you can also provide yourself a what reason is it with customs, just so you can come back and follow up with that file with customs to ask them why is it not acquitted as yet. If it has been acquitted, you insert the acquittal date, acquittal date and date acquitted. The reason why there's 2 is because when did you take it to customs, but ultimately when did they stamp it? Or say, for instance, if your drop down is in customs, but it's not yet acquitted, you can ignore the above and just say in customs date. So you have a record of when you sent it, when was it acquitted from your side, and then the actual acquittal date as to when did customs themselves stamp the documentation. And if customs is a further reference to that, you can also utilize that stamp as the reference as well. Then last but not least, for the running totals, that's what this bottom section is for. So I'm going to press the save button. There I can see there's my linked file to the import entry. So my acquittal has a disposal now of this item. And when I go down way to the bottom, what was the amount? So I'm going to mark this off as 10, 1, and 1. So when I press the save button on there, I'm only acquitting the B&D or the amount, FOB amount of 10. So if I had to go back to the acquitting file itself, I can see, oh, I've used 990 of the remaining. So if I go back and change it to 1,500, for instance, you'll see you didn't actually have to touch the right-hand side. I press save. And then I'm going to change this bottom section to say, oh, it wasn't 10, it was 15 Rand or dollars or whatever the FOB value might be. And you'll see that the right-hand side automatically changes based on the what you have used versus the remaining total of have you acquitted the full import file. Now, the only reason why you might use something like that is if you have an entire consignment of contain a load of boxes, but you only seem to be maybe selling 1 or 2 boxes and then having to send the rest of the boxes back to the supplier. But the supplier's only got so much volumetric space they can take, so you're having to send it back to them in partial loads. That's why the system allows you to have a calculation total based on your intake into the South African country, and then the removal from South Africa, sending it out the country, making certain you've acquitted the entire file in its complete value. All right, so that's just the acquittal system based on the intake and removals in and out the country. So for each disposal, you can press the paper button on the far left-hand side, press the add button, and then go ahead and add your next file reference based on your removal acquittal out this country. So I'm just going to specify this one at 1,500 and number of packages is 100 as well. I believe that's the values. Now you'll have your SCD 500 in front of you to confirm that. I see we've gone over with that. Okay. So we can just change this back to 10 and this one as well. And that should leave our running totals down to a complete 0. Right, so it's always good to have your any acquitted file running totals down to 0, and that confirms that this file is fully being acquitted, so you can continue to the next file accordingly. So I'll just be the acquittal system, and then we can go to the next step over there, outstanding acquittals. So on the outstanding acquittals, this is a very nice filter list where the top section has more of a filter range where you can specify if you have multiple companies, you can choose which company you're using. If you have multiple inquisitions, such as you might be dealing with multiple acquitting agents, populating the list for them, and then you can do your handover acquitting agents and maybe bill for it. Then you've also got the multiple client names. So if you have discrepancies in your client names and you want to do your acquittals per client, you're more than welcome to proceed with that as well. And also, is it going to be due today? So if I'm specifying due today, I'm still going to need to say equals or not like. So equals or not equals based on this 7-day period. You get your acquittal list number. That's why I say it's very important to give your acquittal items a list number. So you can search by the list number and just review that one as well. But if I change this back to none, I can just search it by bill of entry date or registration date. So I'm going to say October the 1st to today's date, and then press the filter button. I see no records found. However, if I click on the show all button, it ignores the date range and then just shows me all the acquittals down below. Now, the outstanding acquittals is a wonderful system to use because what you can do here is locate the file that you've just done and acquitted. So if there's an export file that's acquitted by the import file, or there's an export file that acquits multiple import files or vice versa, that's what the outstanding acquittal system allows for in the easier method. So you'll see everything that's got a bill of entry number against it is files that has been released by customs. And also over here, I can see there's my RRB for the import and the export bill of entry details. So I'm going to tick this box over here. And then I see the bottom section is send to customs list queue. So this is to generate the list queue that I'm going to be sending to customs for the runner. And there's a 2-step procedure here. Number 1 is it generates the customs lists on Excel, gets sent to customs and gets stamped. Once the item gets stamped, you can either go into the acquittal system or you can use the secondary portion of here to mark it as acquitted. Once it's marked as acquitted, it cannot be unmarked. If you're going to have to re-acquit the file, you may as well reprint the list or alternatively recreate the file from scratch. All right, so we'll just give this one a list number, JHB 2022 1011 1 2 3 4 and 1. Who's the acquitting agent? We'll mark that off as easy clear. I see it's on the top right hand side. Acquit by, so the import entry is going to be acquitted by the bill of entry number, the bill of lading number, the GR number, or the provisional payment number. Based on those numbers, is your import entry acquitted by multiple bill of entry numbers or just one independent bill of entry number, or alternatively an independent or multitude of provisional payment case numbers? So this one's just going to be marked off as 1 2 3 4 3 4 5 6 7. And then is there another export entry that also acquits this item as a split entry? So if, say, for instance, you had the 2 items that did acquit it because you had to split your load, then you'd mark it off as 2 different bill of entry numbers that acquit your import entry. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to say it's this item here and this item. So both of these shipments for the GR and the RRB are going to be acquitted by the export bill of entry number over there. Right, so I'll send that one to Q. Now, obviously, an RRB entry, don't get too confused. An RRB entry acquits itself with its own bill of entry number, just confirming that that RRB bill of entry number has left the country. That's all customs are concerned about. So I know I'm adding a GR and RRB to the same acquittal bill of entry number, but yeah, the RRB entry would acquit itself because there's only one entry in South Africa. You don't have the import and re-exportation. It's just the import through South Africa as per your RRB shipment. So the RRB shipment would acquit itself. So that's where you reference the RRB bill of entry number accordingly. Once we have sent it to Q, now you can see the Q almost looks like a table like Excel already. So this is information that's going to go into your Excel list to send to customs. I can see what is the file number, what is it going to be acquitted by, where you can always change these details down below. Change the bill of entry details, the bill of entry duty type and date. Further on the right hand side, you see bill of lading number, your GR number 1, 2, and 3. Your provisional payment, the date, the acquitting agent, acquitting reference. Now, I wouldn't fill that in until I've got that from customs. The value, weight, and packs. When I'm happy with that one, I can see that this is my acquittal list for that list number right there. Now, the very last button here, acquit. I am not going to press the acquit button because I do not have a stamped document from customs confirming that the acquittal has been done from their side. Most days nowadays, customs are doing automatic acquittals, so I believe they send the agent a list asking them for unfinalized files that still need to be acquitted. So the tracking methodology behind that is please just reach out to customs to make certain that there's no outstanding acquittals under your agent name, as if they do exceed a certain time period, there's issues that customs arise. All right, so if I know customs have stamped this, then I would press the acquit button. But as of this moment, I want to print this out, send it to the runner for customs to stamp, or take it there myself. So I'll press the print button on top. And if, say, for instance, I went away from the screen and I didn't print that list accordingly, as long as you've got the acquittal list number, you can go back into the acquittal, outstanding acquittal, or the reports, preferably the outstanding acquittals, filter it by the list number in particular. Have I lost it? Client acquitting due date, acquittal list number, sorry. I'll put in that acquittal list number and press the filter. Now it does say no records found because it's still looking for a bill of entry date. So if I had to press the filter button on that as well, let me just hit the magnifying glass in there. It doesn't bring up the search. It's got to be based on the company that I'm looking at. And I believe the one file I was looking at also was a 2021 file. So I'll just go as far as January as well and hit the filter button. So I can see if I had to filter by that list number, it's not coming up within the range. That's quite curious. So once you had to filter by that list number, you should have been able to tick the two boxes again, resend it to the queue, and then press the acquit button again. So cool. So you can see there, when you're trying to re-acquit the file, you got your list number, your acquitting agent, and if this information is not inserted, you won't be able to send it to the queue. And then it also asks invalid agents. You have to search for the agent accordingly, top right-hand corner. Send that over to the queue. It does allow for the bill of entry numbers to be blank, purely and solely because you have the ability to insert bill of entry numbers down below at a later stage. So once the runners has come back and you want to acquit this item, then I can just go ahead and press the acquit button, and I've officially acquitted list number JSB 2022-1011-0001. So the main reason why I couldn't find that acquittal list earlier is because I hadn't pressed the acquit button. The acquit button removes it off the acquittal register. So if I had to press the refresh button again, I'm not going to be able to re-acquit the file based on an additional export entry because I've already pressed the acquit button to remove it from the list. That's why you'll take notes when I did run a search for the acquittal list number above and hit the filter button previously, nothing had come up. So your acquittal list register to search for this number isn't a valid option. Excuse me, isn't a valid option to use for searching from the list because now we know those items are acquitted. There's no need to print them anymore. The only reason why that acquittal list number is important is to print out the job. So are we printing out the detail or the summary? And are we sending it as a client list? So if I press the button for client list, and then the customs list, I should be able to print out the Excel document based on the list number that I type in. And then it will give you a document like this with your logo on top for customs to stamp. All right. We can also give you a secondary report that will give you a bunch of list numbers. So if you ever forget what list numbers you had created in the system, we can generate and attach a secondary report, maybe user by start date, end date, or duty types or specific customs regions if you want to. As long as the filtering is sensible, we can give you another report to say, these are the list numbers you have created. The reason for remembering a list number is if you forget to print it now and keep it on record, you move away from the screen and then you want to come back to reprint that list number in particular, it will ask you what was the previous list number you had used, and there's no reminder on the system. So that's why I say it's always good to maybe have a report for that list number to print your summary or your detail, so that that list can go to customs, get stamped, get acquitted, and then come back. All right, so there's your summary scenario as well. So you can either take the detailed through to customs or the summary scenario, print it out, get it stamped, and keep it in your filing system, please. Now, that was the easy part. And then the even easier part is the cross-reference section. Now, this is most definitely a favorite out there. So I'll just jump back over to 2021 as well. Let's go to the first, all the way through to today's date and press the search button. So to answer your question level, even on the legacy application, you can go to the cross-reference system like this. You'll see that for during the date period that I've chosen, anything older than 28 days, it's too late. Customs have already asked you for the acquittals, too late. You're going to have to deal with the repercussions based on that. But if you're within the 7-day period, the green period, it's always good to isolate it to that date range so you can see what was done today for the next 7 days. We can go ahead and see, okay, cool. The top 3 files here have a tick box next to it, but then we have a tests file over here that has an exclamation mark that says create acquittal. So if we go into that file, I believe it might be it's an import file there. If we go into that file in particular, and we just have a look there, we can see, it is a warehousing entry. So warehousing entries, OS or SOS, have between 6 months to 2 years before they have to leave the country. And if they don't leave the country, customs would have asked for the duty and VAT. So the declaration that forces this entry to leave the country is what will acquit the original intake into the country. I know it's a warehousing entry, so intake into their bond store, but either which way. So we can see there's a onward transfer mode. there's an acquittal agent, but the most common thing here is they probably forgot to tick the box acquittal required. Now, this one, the acquittal hasn't even been created because it's on the list saying you registered the file. There's no acquittal created because ultimately you haven't done your worksheet or SAD 500 on this one. But you might get handover shipments where you don't want to go that far, so you just do the registration screen. Go to your cross-referencing system. And then again, I'm just going to go back to January 2021, just to today's date, so I can pick up that file number again. And I can see this might have been a handover shipment, but I'm still going to use it to create the acquittal. Are you sure you want to create the acquittal? Okay. So within the legacy application as well, you've just got a tick box that you tick over here, or it's actually a cross. Just tick on that, and it will just ask you, are you sure you want to create the acquittal? You say, yeah. The web system is quite formidable in that aspect, that if you haven't created the acquittal for the acquittal register, but it meets all the criteria, then it just tells you on this menu here, between a specific date range, hey, there's a warning over here. Are you sure you don't want to create the acquittal? And the system just allows you to press a two-step verification, create the acquittal, and press the OK, and it will literally create the acquittal for that file. If we have to go back and say, oh, that file number that we had just acquitted, so we'll go there. So back to the acquittal system, referencing that same file number that we had earlier. So I'm just going to go back to that file number. Now, if you do use the back button, please remember that's loading it from your local PC. So if you're ever working on a file, maybe just refresh the screen first before you start trying to save data if you note you have a forward button. All right. So if we did note we got the list number, we had printed the list out, not unacquitted, and then it should have presented us with that file number. So let's just jump back to that previous list we had printed before. I'm just going to go to the first customs list I printed here before, just to grab the bill of entry number, or in this case, the file number. Sorry about that. Enable editing. Okay. And I can just go back to the home page, Acquittals, Acquittal system, and search for a specific file number. So I can see based on the file number, the total remaining is perfectly fine. And it's always good to use in this order. So I now have showed you the different screens, but the best way to use the acquittal system is a specific order. Number one, the outstanding acquittals, because that's where you filter the information. You tick the boxes of which export entries might be acquitted in the import entry. You send it to the queue, which gives you the Excel list to draw out. Once the queue is drawn out, you send it to customs. It gets stamped, you bring it back. From there, you've got a bunch of items on the queue to say, oh, there's my file. Now I can see customs have stamped it. Then I can go back into the acquittal system, locate that file independently, file by file, and that's where you would go in and actually capture your disposals to say, leave it at remaining total of 0, as per each bill of entry number that acquits the import entry can be captured over here, removing it from the list entirely. And then the very last thing to take note of, and just go back to the acquittal system there, acquittals cross-reference system there, or outstanding acquittals. So now I'm on the outstanding acquittal list. If I had to go to the show all and search for my file in the outstanding acquittal items, you'll see that it is no longer part of the list. So if you accidentally acquitted an item and you want to reverse it, you're going to have to capture another file under the acquittal system to have that file reinstated on this list. So once you do send it to the queue and you press the acquit button, then please definitely make certain that you give it a printout, save it, because if you already acquitted it at the end, you won't be able to re-acquit the file thereafter. All right, so I'm just going to tick this box, give it another list number of 1001. Acquitting agent, easy clear. Is going to be acquitted by the bill of entry numbers, sent to queue. And once I've got it on the queue, I should be able to print this list number. So it's always good to send it to a queue, hit your printout so that you can have your summary for the 1001, get it stamped by customs, but then only come back to it and press the acquit button once you know that customs have actually stamped it, because the moment you press this acquit button, it's removed from the list above, so you can't rework it again. All right. Cool, but in this terms, it looks like we actually have to press the acquit button so that it goes onto the list. And then you can use the acquittal system just to correspond any import entries acquitted by your export entries as well. Cool. So there's that default import file that I was just using. I see it's quite a bare file, but then you can see it pulls through and who's the acquitting personnel as well. So we can just go back into Easy Clear for one last final scenario. Go back into the Easy Clear system and we can click on the last section that says reports, and you'll see that any files that you have acquitted from date range, specifically today's dates, for instance, I can run a download on that list and I can see what files have been acquitted based on the date range as well, and what's still outstanding. And if you have quite the extensive outstanding acquittal list, you can definitely ask EasyClear to help you remove old items from your acquittal list and register, which definitely allows you the opportunity to either do it yourself, or it might be in your best interest to reach out to us telephonically and ask us for a helping hand. But just to show everybody out there, if you want to get rid of old items, you can just go check all and acquit the files. So if I'm having to check absolutely everything, give it an acquittal list number, I'm going to be able to have the opportunity to remove all these items from the acquittal register in one go, so that new files can start populating here, and you've got more of a hands-on control for the acquittal system. Alrighty, as I said before, microphones are on. Is there any specific questions or processes you would like to go through? Right, is anybody who'd like me to take you through that process again? Or is there any queries or questions as to what the acquittal system means? What does customs understand by the acquittal system? Furthermore to that, has anybody potentially gone through the SARS documentation? So if you do just Google as well, SARS acquittal, acquittal policy, or an acquittal form, you can always get their contact number or customs external declaration policy for acquittals. What are the endorsements on that as well? Let's just Google through that as well. There you go. Acquittal process bonded transfer goods has been enhanced. So there's even a further enhancement system since the 30th of September 2021. So it's always good to go through customs policies, because I mean there are specific scenarios where customs might bring out a new draft policy, and if they do, then it's always good to go through that so you know what's coming before it blindsides you from afar. So we can see here acquittals of electronic reports. I do note that some companies do receive their acquittal registers on the e-filing system, and some companies receive their acquittal outstanding lists from customs on email as well. So just make certain that if the person receiving the acquittal outstanding registers is not available at work, then maybe provide customs with multiple email addresses that they can contact you on. So it's always good to go through this policy. If you want to Google the exact policy name and number, don't see it actually came up there. But it might be this one over here, SCTR01-02. But then this document number here is SCCC38, reporting of conveyance goods, external policy, inclusive with the acquittals of electronic reporting as well. So if we go to 2.4, ignoring the rest, 2.3, 2.4, we can actually just read through the legislation, and it takes you furthermore into the customs declaration when there is levies or penalties prescribed in obviously the section 91 as towards what are the provisional payments, acquittal terms and conditions as well. And furthermore to that, it takes you through the record keeping. So it's always good to say, if you do manual acquittal items, especially DA 3064 section 38, where you do that manually, you can print it from our system and take it into customs, but those items are also acquittal required. But because there's such a manual process, there's no real electronic method for it, which is why customs will ask you to do the record keeping as well. So it's always good to keep up with the customs policies of the acquittal system as you're going through it, just in case they might change anything. Alrighty, as I mentioned before, there's an open mic at the moment. Is there any questions specific to the acquittal system or any other reporting you would like to go through or review based on the acquittal system? I'm happy to answer that.
Hi, Devin. Violet here. How are you doing?
Good and self, Violet.
I'm good, thanks. Dev, just tell me quickly on this acquittal system that you got on the web application. Is there a report that we can draw out like a weekly report that we can draw to see all the outstanding acquittals, or is it only once you've sent it to Q that it goes into the report?
No, outstanding acquittals is purely based on the fact that the cross-reference is first checked to make certain that if you had recent files, I'd always just go through the cross-reference first before you print out the acquittal system, just to go back the 7 days or the 15 days and just review, are there any files in sequence there? Are they on the acquittal list in the first place? So that I would say is first prize before you go to the report, to make certain that any item that falls to the criteria of acquittals is on your acquittal system. Because if it's not on the acquittal system, it's not going to be on the report either. So your first prize is the cross-reference, and just base it on the last 30 days or last 15 days accordingly. Then the next item will just be to mainly answer your question now, will be the outstanding acquittals. There you can just see what is there, but what's still outstanding. But I prefer the report section over here, because then it's got the two sections, say acquitted by registration or the unacquitted by registration dates as well. And that does print to Excel. So I can hit the generate button, just put in my start date and my end dates. Let's see, for September through to today, press the download, and it immediately gives you your unacquitted or open items for your acquittal register right then and there. All right. So for that date range between August through, sorry, not August, September through to October, I see I've got a total of 5 files that are outstanding on the acquittal system.
Thank you. And that only happens if the acquittal box is ticked on their last screen.
No, in regards to that one, that's what removes it from this list. So that last screen that I had taken you through, if you acquit an item, it's no longer going to fall on the unacquitted register. It's going to fall onto your acquitted register. So, oh, sorry, I think I misconstrued your question there. Yes, if you go into cross-reference and you say create acquittal, then it will fall under the unacquitted reports. But for unacquitted reports, you get two, acquitted or unacquitted, which will fall into your outstanding acquittal system to tick the boxes, make certain it is acquitted by export entry, and that'll remove it from the unacquitted register over to the acquitted register accordingly.
Thanks, Dev. The question was on when you create your RIT, RIB, whichever entry that needs an acquittal, on the last screen of the SAD 500, before we print the SAD 500, there where it says acquittal needed, just above or just below the substitution box.
Yes.
So if that box is not ticked, it won't show up on my report.
That is correct, yeah.
Thank you.
But if it still meets the criteria of onward transfer mode and acquitting agents, and the box is still not ticked, it won't show on the report, but the cross-reference system can help with that, because it's as if you're ticking the box as a final step. So yeah, by default, if it meets the criteria of an acquittal, you will find that it will automatically create the tick the box for you anyway.
Okay, thank you.
So SAD 500. So I see on this one over here, I've got a GR type entry. If I have to look at the EDI send receive, I see it's all rejected. So what I'm going to do for this GR entry is, just to note, every time in EasyClear, if you recalculate a customs worksheet, technically your SAD 500 gets deleted and then recreated. So just as a test, I've recalculated the worksheet, SAD 500, clicked on the GR entry, and I can see the acquittal required is automatically ticked on this one. So it's only a case of, if I had unticked the box, saved it, then I can see, per the recommendation here, even the system, because it's a GR entry, it doesn't even let the user untick the box. So as long as the conditions are met, or for instance, a GR entry, acquittal will always be mandatory. CCA is the more tricky part, where the system doesn't know the differences of what type of entry you're doing, so it will just double check with you and validate, are we ticking the box or not?
Yeah, because that's where we'll have a bunch of problems.
Absolutely. And if there are any further problems like that, like most commonly, we do find that a lot of people generate the acquittal register, they acquit the item, removing it from the acquittal system, take it into SARS or customs, only to realize that customs disagree with the acquittal and they deny the list number. So now you have to remove that item from the list number. I find the best way, because you're keeping actual hard-coded documents, is inside of the Excel document, just delete that line from that list number, so you can get that one stamped without that entry and then keep it on record. But then you have to go ahead and say, okay, what did customs require of me to make certain that this item is acquitted properly, so I'm not penalized or anything of the sort? That's where you'd phone EasyClear and you'd ask, unfortunately, you've done your outstanding acquittal item, you've acquitted the import entry with the export entry, you've removed it from the acquittal system. At that point, it is too late. There's no ways to reinstate that file that you already acquitted. So you're going to have to go into the acquittal system. So if you've done the cross-reference, you've done an acquittal, it's already removed from the list, it's on a list number, and you need to reinstate it. As I say, it is too late at that point. You're going to have to come back to the acquittal system and add a file. And this is literally where you'd be putting in the information accordingly of re-adding the file as a new acquittal file, so that you can do your disposals and do your acquitted export entry against the new file that you raised. Right, so I do know that that is quite the headache to turn around. Unfortunately, that is the way that the acquittal system does work, that if you already acquitted an item, it's no longer on the list, you've got to put it on a new list for SARS. You reach a point where it's too late, you have to raise a new acquittal manually. But the beautiful thing about that is, even when you do, there isn't a lot of fields. It's not like you're registering a whole file in particular. If there are any recommendations to that, due to the fact that 99% you deal with acquittals on a daily basis, and you'd like to maybe make suggestions that enhance the acquittal system to best suit your business requirements, by all means, please send those recommendations to us on email, so we can either try and abide to it, or if it feels like it's more complicated or unique to your company, we'll probably be in touch with you directly. Thank you everybody for joining. I take that's all the questions of the day. So I'm going to stop the recording.